Western Canada Pro Hockey Scouts Foundation is holding its second annual Wall of Fame induction dinner in Okotoks on July 29th. Let's go out now to Kamloops. And Greg, you have an absolutely unmatched interest in junior hockey, the likes that I have never seen. So how did your love for junior hockey all begin?
Well, I guess you'd have to go back to the 70s. I actually started in the journalism business at the Brandon Sun in the early 70s. But a guy by the name of Bruce Penton was covering the Wheat Kings at that time. And I got hired there as they decided to go from a 2-man staff to a 3-man staff. So I was there 2 years, and then I got a call from Jack Matheson, the legendary sports editor of the Winnipeg Tribune, and he offered me a job. So I went into Winnipeg, spent 5 years at the Tribune, and in the winters, one of my beats was the Manitoba Junior Hockey League, and I got to do a bit of the Western League with the Monarchs and the clubs. They were pretty much cellar dwellers there.
Oh, yes. Remember those.
And then I got I had a friend who was a sports editor at the Brandon Sun at the time, and he was looking for someone to cover the Wheat Kings starting in the fall of '78. Well, that was the Prop, Ellison, Boschman, McCrimmon team.
Oh, yeah.
I think they lost 5 regular season games all year.
Yeah.
So I went back to Brandon strictly to cover that. And that was really when I really came to enjoy covering junior hockey. And it was the thing I learned was that it was more than the hockey. It was the people. It was the hockey people. And I really enjoyed being around hockey people, hockey scouts, all that kind of thing. So, and it just went on from there. I spent 5 years doing that, and then I was in Regina for 17 years, and came here in 2000. As hard as it is to believe, I've been here 25 years, although only working till when was it? January 2014, which was when the paper here folded. So I've been pretty much retired since then.
Well, you weren't really retired when you were taking note and all the work you put into that with your love of hockey. I just wanted to go back to that Brandon team that was so good with Brian Propp and all the other star players that ended up going in the NHL. The Pats were at the bottom of the league at that time when Brandon was so good. And I can remember a game, Greg, in the old Agrodome, now called the Brand Center, when, I don't know, it was like 11-1 for Brandon in the third period or something like that. And Brian Propp had a breakaway from center ice and decided not to shoot. He just circled, sort of mocking the Pats, just circled around, didn't bother shooting.
If memory serves, they played 14 times that season, I think. The Pats and the Wheat Kings. And the Pats didn't win any. And some of them were, I seem to remember a 14-goal game, I think. Yeah. And, when I look back at that season, Duncan McCollum was the Wheat Kings head coach. Mm-hmm. He didn't have an assistant coach. When you look at coaching staffs now, with goaltending coaches and video coaches and, on and on and on, it was one head coach and that was it. And a lot of times, Brad McCrimmon, who was mature beyond his years at that time, he would actually run some of the practices. And in those days, it was a much older league. Like there weren't a lot of, if any, very few 16-year-olds. And if you stepped out of line as a younger player, one of the older guys just simply went over and said, "Hey, we don't do that here. We that's not how we operate," and just kept them in line. And that Wheat King team was really something to be around, to get to watch them. How they carried themselves. The whole package.
Oh, tremendous! I couldn't believe they didn't win the Memorial Cup. I believe they lost the Memorial Cup final.
I would suggest they lost the Memorial Cup at a game in Regina when a defenseman, it was one of those games where some of the WHL players got together to play some Russians. And Wheat King defenseman by the name of Mike Perovich came out of that with a broken wrist. And he was likely behind Brad McCrimmon, he was likely their number 2 defenseman, maybe number 3. And they really had a hard time distributing his minutes. And Brad McCrimmon, it's gotten to be kind of a Memorial Cup myth or legend, if you will, that Brad, in the final against Peterborough, the game went into overtime, that Brad McCrimmon played every minute of the game. And, he didn't. He had a couple of shifts off, and there were a couple of penalties. But by the time it got to that stage of the season, he was a mere shell of what he had been during the season. So I really think it's easy to make excuses, but if Perovich had been healthy, I think the Vikings would have won the Memorial Cup that season.
Right. Well, tell me about the Western Canada Professional Hockey Scouts Foundation. Now, how did you get involved with that group, Greg?
Well, you mentioned my blog, the Taking Note. I had come to the decision that I was going to take a break from it because, as you mentioned, I've been doing it for a long time. So I just decided to shut it down and really take a break, an extended break. I was thinking, 2 or 3 months, and then see how I felt. So that's what I had done. And out of the clear blue one day, I got a phone call from Garth Malarchuk, a longtime Toronto Maple Leafs scout, former WHL head coach. He did a tour of duty in Kelowna after having coached midget and junior A in the Calgary area. Garth was in the process of getting the foundation up and running. It was a dream that a lot of the scouts had, a number of scouts had, and they had finally decided that it was time to quit talking about it. And if they were going to do it, it was, let's see some action, let's get going. So, they were planning their first dinner, if you will, first of all, I should say that they were going to have this Wall of Honor, and they needed a home.
Yep.
And they ended up in Okotoks. And you might ask why Okotoks, which is the question I had. And it turns out they inquired of a number of WHL, or a number of arenas that are home to WHL teams, and couldn't find anyone who was at all interested. And then Okotoks surfaced and gave them a warm welcome, opened their arms, the whole bit. So that's how they ended up with the Wall of Honor in Okotoks. And they had their first dinner on September 30th, 2023. So not even 2 years ago. It was a roast of Ron McLean. And if you haven't seen the video of Elliot Friedman roasting Ron McLean, it's on the on our website, and it is something. But that was really the first fundraiser. So that got the seed money to start the Wall of Honor, to purchase the equipment, to set that up in Okotoks. And really what it is a rolling video montage, if you will, that shows portraits of every inductee and a brief bio. But anyway, Garth asked me if I'd be interested in helping them out. And I don't know if he was aware that I had shut down my blog or, really wasn't doing anything. But I said, give me a day to think about it. And I thought about it and said, sure, I'll help. So I'm now, as you suggested, the editor historian, which basically means I write all the news releases, any letters to people or to organizations, NHL teams looking for sponsorship or looking for, any kind of support. I'm the one writing the letters. So that has kept me quite busy because I'm also responsible for some of what goes on the website in terms of when it goes on, when it goes up, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And
just a little bit of a background on the foundation. It's nonprofit. Right now we're operating under the Alberta Society Act because we were incorporated in Alberta because of the Okotoks connection. But we have applied for full charity status with Revenue Canada. We expect that, where we hope, we're certainly positive about it, that we'll get that in the next few weeks, because there's a lot more to this than the Wall of Honor. Although the Wall of Honor is a big part of it because of showing respect for all these scouts. But we're also involved in providing financial aid to any present day or former scouts who've encountered health issues. As an example, one scout ended up in Vancouver being treated for leukemia, and had some pretty hefty hotel bills with his wife and that. So, we helped out with that. We've helped out Make-A-Wish Foundation. We got a young fellow to a Canucks game, his very first NHL game. We've done a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's really a foundation. There's more to it than the Wall of Honor.
Well, the Western Canada Professional Hockey Scouts Foundation has entered into a promotional agreement with Harvard Media involving the celebration and celebrating Indigenous hockey legends, a banquet that's going to be held in Regina at the Connexus Arts Center September 3rd, which of course is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So between June 9th and September 30th, Harvard Media will be recognized as an event sponsor and will provide on-air and online support from its Regina-based radio stations, 620 CKRM Play 92 and 105.9 The Wolf. And that's great. SportsCage is going to be completely behind this foundation and that you're working with, Greg, that's for sure. Now, of course, you're on your first Wall of Honor, your second one coming right up here. The first one, you had some big names from southern Saskatchewan. Ross Mahoney, for example. Ross Mahoney reminds me of Bob Turner in some ways, and this is why. Ross walks around town. He doesn't know nobody knows what a bigwig he is in the NHL. Like, he's the assistant general manager. He does a great job on the draft. Got a great stable of young players in the wings for the Capitals. Has won the Stanley Cup. And everybody just thinks he's Ross, doesn't realize he's also got, as you can tell, he's got his fingers in some of their trades as well. You can just tell who they trade for. And yeah, Ross would like that guy. Meanwhile, Bob Turner walked around town and everybody just knew him as the Pats coach. Didn't realize he'd won 5 straight Stanley Cups playing for the Montreal Canadiens. Like, Ross is such a humble person, Greg. And he went in.
Bob Turner was my realtor, was our realtor.
That's right.
Here in Regina.
That's right.
I mean, 5 Stanley Cup rings. 5.
No, nobody knew. Seemed to know about it.
And when people talk about the Montreal Canadiens, you never hear Bob Turner's name mentioned. It's the Richard boys and Cornway and the Mavliches and on and on. And then you say, well, what about Bob Turner? And they'll say, well, what about him? Well, 5 Stanley Cup rings. No. It's amazing. And when I was in Regina, I mean, I wish now that I'd sat down on occasion and chatted with him more than I did about those days with Montreal, because that must have really been something. I mean, 5 Stanley Cups, goodness sakes.
It's never been done before. And John Beliveau, when he was on his book tour in 1995, told me that they wouldn't have won those 5 straight cups without Bob Turner, because he played on a defensive pairing with Harvey. And, of course, Harvey was a rusher and was always going up ice, and Bob was saving his ass, the legendary Doug Harvey. And he said, if it weren't for Bob Turner, I don't think we'd won all those cups.
Well, I think the fact that Bob was there to win 5 Stanley Cups tells you how valuable he was to the team, because they didn't trade him. They recognized that they needed him. And like all teams, successful teams, they need guys like that. They need foot soldiers. But a lot of times with some of those bottom roster players, they just get shuffled in and out. And yet Bob was there for five Stanley Cups. It just amazes me.
Now, Barry Trapp's coming on later on this show, because he's going into the Saskatchewan Hockey Hall of Fame on Saturday, and one of your old employees, Rob Vanstone, is going to be along to talk to Barry. Barry, how did he pull this off, Greg? Barry Trapp, who was one of your first scouts to go into your Wall of Honor, worked in the hockey business for 62 years, and yet everybody liked him. How can that be possible?
Oh, I know. I know. And on top of that, he worked for Hockey Canada. And there aren't a lot of people who come out of Hockey Canada being highly popular, because it's such they end up in such a polarizing situation. If they don't win gold, whatever team they're involved with doesn't win gold, well, then they don't know what they're doing. And somehow Trapper survived all of that. And like you say, 62 years. And you mentioned his name, and what a great guy.
Yeah, I know.
How's he doing? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny because I sent him, when I saw that, was it yesterday or the day before, I saw that he was going into the Saskatchewan Hockey Hall of Fame. I sent him a quick note just to congratulate him, and he emailed me back, and the first thing he said was he was going on a SportsCage. He said, going to be on the SportsCage.
Yeah, that's right. About 5'10".
Tell him I said hi.
I will. Okay. And then, again, he went into your first inaugural Wall of Fame. Other individuals well known in southern Saskatchewan that did as well. Lauren Davis, another sort of, his son was one of your cohorts, and Lauren Davis he was an amazing guy. I mean, he was the guy that pounded the table for Grant Fuhrer so hard that Glenn Sather said, "Are you that certain about Grant Fuhrer?" He said, "Yes," and the rest is history.
Yeah, yeah. And, Lauren was part of the crew that Barry Fraser put together. And for that, what did they win? Four Stanley Cups in 5 years?
They should have won 5 and tied Turner, but they, remember, what was his name, Steve Smith, was it? Scored on his own net. And I was happy because the Habs record didn't get broken. Go ahead.
And, the funny thing is, one thing that almost all of these scouts have in common, Barry Trapp, Lauren Davis, all of those guys, great storytellers. I mean, you used to go to the Agrodome, the Brand Center now, 7:00 game, be there shortly after 5:00 and be in the scouts room or the scout media room, whatever you want to call it. Because sure as heck, Lauren would be there, and he'd be bringing, he'd have Eddie Chadwick with him, or Ace Bailey, or there'd be one of his longtime buddies there, and the stories would be flowing like fine wine.
Oh, were they ever? They refine them. He told me a story once about Gordie Howe that we could never say on the air, and I couldn't believe it, but it was a great story. Now, others that were in your inaugural Wall of Fame, one that stuck out was Murray Torchy Shell, because I knew Murray. Now, he's now buried at the RCMP depot because he was a Mountie, but I remember Murray when he was helping out with the Rough Riders with equipment. Had no idea about his scouting background. Tell me about Murray Torchy Shell.
So Torchy Shell was one of my favorite. I did all the bios that appear on the Wall of Honor, and his was one of the really fun ones when I stumbled on the information on him. I had met him. I knew him. Was aware of his scouting exploits, but I wasn't aware that he was a big-time sports memorabilia collector. And I wasn't aware that in the offseason, when he was scouting for mostly Central Scouting and some with the Leafs, but in the off-season for hockey, he was an assistant equipment manager with the Rough Riders. And that just blew me away, because you look at today's scouts, how many of them would spend their summers up until the start of hockey season working for a football team doing work like that. The other part of Torchy's story too is that he was with Central Scouting, and he was, I forget where it was, he was in Ontario visiting his mother, Kingston or Kitchener, one of the places that had an OHL franchise, and he was there to visit her and to scout a game, and darned if he didn't drop dead of a heart attack. And that kind of blew me away, because he'd had such a neat story up to that point. But there he was on a scouting trip, and I'm sure, the old cliche about, he died doing what he loved to do. So, but no, he was a good one. And I should mention this year, Larry Horning and Brad Horning are two of the inductees going in. So it's really kind of neat that father and son are going in.
A lot of people don't realize or maybe remember that Brad, scouted right out of his wheelchair. And his dad, of course, was a scout. And I believe his dad played for the Jets, didn't he? Jets. Yeah. And but Brad was scouting in a wheelchair. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, Mike Smith, who was then the general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks, brought him on board as an intern to start with. And I think at the beginning, he had Brad basically scouting via the internet, more looking for stories or tidbits out of newspapers and stuff like that. But it wasn't long before they had him scouting at, mostly at Pats games, because he was at, I think, almost all the Pats games, or every game that he could get to. And definitely did some work for the Blackhawks.
Now, another scout that went into your wall of fame was former Pat general manager Del Wilson, who, of course, along with Bob Turner, won a Memorial Cup. He is the GM. Bob Turner is the coach. Del Wilson, I believe he coached, or rather, I believe he managed the Pats while he was scouting for the Montreal Canadiens. Is that correct?
Yes. He scouted for Montreal for 47 years.
Wow.
In this day and age, when a lot of scouts bounce around, 2 years here, 3 years there, 47 years with one organization. I mean, that's just unheard of. And yes, he scouted for Montreal while he was running the Pats, and back then the Pats had a connection back in the day. What were they? C forms that players signed that locked them into an organization.
Before
expansion. The draft.
Yep.
And Del ended up. He was one of the co-founders of the what now is the Western Hockey League. Mm-hmm. Was in the group that first purchased the Pats. Was their general manager. He pretty much did it all as with the Pats and with the Western Hockey League back then. The WHL's annual top goaltending award is named after Del Wilson, who I wasn't aware. I should have been, because the trophy was named after him, and I knew that, but I wasn't aware that in his playing days he had been a goaltender. Mm-hmm. And something else I didn't know about him was that he was a scratch golfer. In fact, in I think 1957, he won the Saskatchewan Men's Amateur.
Wow.
So, that kind of blew me away, because when I got to know Del a little bit when I was in Regina, I never dreamt that he was a golfer. Never heard anything about him playing golf.
Yeah, I didn't know that myself. Now, I know some people, Clark Gillies said it. He said about, 5-6 years ago, he says, I can't believe the Pats haven't won the Memorial Cup since we won it when Clark was on the team in 1974. But here's the facts. The Memorial Cup is extremely now hard to win, with over 60 teams going at it.
Well, 60 teams plus the host team gets in for free.
Yeah.
So, that's right. that just stacks the odds even a little more against a championship team. But with the Western Hockey League teams, I've always felt that with those teams, winning the Western Hockey League is what it's all about.
Yeah.
And they work so hard, play so hard to win the WHL title, that it's really hard to turn it around in a matter of days and get geared up for the next stage, which is the Memorial Cup, especially when you can lose the first game and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point.
It's the round robin, but no, it's been a long time since the Pats won, and again, there's Bob Turner again. One of the neat Bob Turner stories from that 1974 Memorial Cup was player agents were just starting to be a thing, and that Memorial Cup was in Calgary, and a guy by the name of Alan Eagleson was sniffing around, and apparently Bob Turner claimed that at one stage he'd had his fill of Ellen Eagleson, and he told him Eagleson was in Turner's hotel room, and Bob told him that if he saw him talking to one more of his players, he was going to be throwing him off a balcony.
That sounds like what Bob said.
Yeah,
Alan Eagleson was a smoothie. I met him once. I thought he was the greatest, but as time told later, he wasn't the greatest. Greg, the time has gone by way too fast to have you on this show, and of course, a lot of people will remember you from your glory days at the leader post. Thanks for joining us on SportsCage. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Don. It's great to see you again.